Good Thursday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com mailbag podcast presented by our good friends at Blue Water Climate Control. Be sure and check them out online at bluewaterclimatecontrol.com or give them a buzz at 865-299-2290. That's Blue Water Climate Control for all your HVAC needs. Check them out for whatever you need for any kind of repair, whether it's a simple service or a major repair. They're going to take care of you at Blue Water Climate Control. They're going to do the right repair the right way the first time. Be sure and check them out. You can book your appointment online or give them a buzz, Jeremy and his staff a buzz at 865-299-2290 with Austin Price. Brent Hubbs, glad to have you along with us on this mailbag edition of the podcast. And Austin, we will jump right into it. First question out of the gate from Nash Ketchum. If Milton is named a starter, where does he fall in your projected quarterback power rankings for the East? Who would you say is the best quarterback Tennessee will face this year? That one seems like a pretty easy lay down. JT Daniels is the best in the East and the most talented quarterback Tennessee is going to play.
Yeah, the only thing you could maybe say would be Matt Corral at Ole Miss as far as playmaking ability. And until Bryce plays at Alabama, he just doesn't have any kind of body of work at Alabama. So I would definitely say JT though as well. And as far as the East, it's kind of JT and then everybody's tied second. Everybody's either getting a new head coach, they're new to the school, a new coordinator, no experience. There's nobody to me. There's not anybody that you can just go, okay, hey, he out of default because he's got experience. He's the number two. There's just newness abound across the East behind JT. And so, you could see Emory Jones, you could see Joe Milton, get a Kentucky who came from Penn State. I know they're high on him, but they got a new offense. How's he really look, with their offensive weapons up there that was set up to do something different a year ago. So, yeah, I just think it's a hodgepodge behind JT until, a month in, we can kind of see everybody play.
Yep, because JT does have his offensive coordinator back as well. Now, some of his weapons are a question mark because of some of the injuries they've had. It's interesting on Emory Jones. Joe Milton may have more experience than Emory Jones. Probably has more experience than Emory Jones has. Now, not in the same system. Emory Jones has been in the system, but I think Emory Jones has got to prove to everybody he can do more than run around, right? I know – Dan Mullen's done a great job with quarterbacks and all different types of quarterbacks, and Emory Jones may make a huge step forward, but he's got to show more than just a guy who tucks it and runs, which is kind of what he's been to this point in his career at Florida. Biggin wants to know any time frame on an update on Lindsey Nelson Stadium renovations. Tony Vitello saying on Volcall's Wednesday night, expanded capacity this season. Don't know if that's going to be that's going to be some type of temporary bleachers or like what they had for the regional. They are working on some stuff underneath the stadium for player enhancement, player development, which has been on the books. They can get started on that one because there's already some approval with building codes and the commissioners and all those things that you have to get done. That's why some of the things are being done in in Neyland Stadium that are being done, because they were already on the docket. You could get to that quickly. Lights being one of those. That's something that was on the docket and already down the road for approval when Danny White got here. So I think that's why you're going to see some of that stuff done inside Lindsey Nelson Stadium that fans won't see. And then I think at the end of this upcoming baseball season is when you're going to see the major renovation, the major facelift, if you will, to Lindsey Nelson Stadium. I think that is when you're going to see the big change take place to the look of that stadium based on Tony Vitello's comments and everybody else that you talk to. I think one of the things is they got to continue with the drawings and the renderings to decide exactly what you're looking at. What's the cost going to be and how different are you going to make it? Is what Tony Vitello's vision, Danny White's vision, what do they come up with in terms of how they want that to look, how big they want it to be, and all of those things. CG Shaw wants to know, what are you looking forward to finding out most about this team in a game? How much they have improved, or how does the staff players react when adversity hits? Why, and what are you looking for the most, Austin?
Offense, and more offense. We watched such putrid offense a year ago. And so to me, it's really, really easy. If Tennessee wins 60-40, I think, you might be scratching your head at the defense, but I think everybody's just going to be happy to see some excitement, some fireworks, and, just kind of an offensive explosion. So, to me, that's rather easy.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're curious as to see how this team handles adversity, but that adversity is not going to hit till probably the Pitt game, more likely. So I'm curious to see that how they function in terms of play calling and running this high tempo. But it all goes back to offense. It starts a quarterback play. Do they do some things with quarterback play that's going to scare some other opponents because they just haven't been able to do that the way that you need to be successful the last couple of years. C Trout M1 wants to know, hey, I love football documentaries like Last Chance U, Undefeated, Hard Knocks, etc. If I were an athletic director in this age of NIL, I would hire a film crew to do something similar for my team, give the athletes plenty of time on camera, make viewers feel like they know these kids on a personal level. If you all suddenly found yourself in a role of AD, what creative ideas would you explore to maximize the NIL potential of players in your program?
Well, the first thing you got to know is Tennessee can't set up, NIL deals. That has to come from an outside source. But you can put your kids in a position where they're more visible. And that does help them get more NIL deals, in my opinion, especially when people see their personality. I mean, what would Grant and Admiral have made just a couple of years ago because of their personality and the way they do things? I mean, that's kind of what Fulke's capitalized on with the Powell stuff. I mean, kid's super personable when he's out, out amongst the fans, and I think those guys would have been too. So, finding ways to, make your guys more, I guess, visible. And a lot of that starts, Brent, with letting your freshmen talk.
Yeah, and if you wanted to get really creative, if I were an AD and I had resources, I would be tempted, Austin, to send my film crew to the hometowns of some of my signees, not midterm enrollees, but guys who signed, and do some player features and do some features on those guys before they ever got here, to try to make them marketable out of the gate. Particularly if you're talking about basketball, where you might only have a kid for a year anyway. I think if you got and introduced everybody to them before they ever put on pads, kind of like you see some NFL teams do with a draft pick. A lot of times they'll go see to the first round pick's hometown and do a big story on them or do something like that. I think that's something you could explore doing, because the thing is, you've got to try to create that personality or let them sell their personality as fast as you can. The problem with that is how many kids are going to be willing to give up that time without getting money. Are they willing to do a bunch of interview stuff? Are they going to be asking for money off for all those? I think you're going to see kids willing to do those because they're going to realize you have to do those things in order to get NIL deals. I don't think you're necessarily just going to get them based on your star ranking. You know what I'm saying? I think it's going to have to be a situation where businesses are comfortable with you and have an idea who you are before they enter an agreement with you on those types of things. But I don't think you can get overly creative. I think there's some limited things you can do, but I don't know that there's a bunch of crazy, tons of things that you could do. I mean, hey, you can't spring game. You're gonna set up autograph stands for all those kids, or those kids after they sign going to do their autograph stuff outside the stadium, in an NIL deal before they ever get here. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, the days of autograph days are probably over, aren't they?
In some ways, but a lot of people thought that kids wouldn't do interviews without having their
It's true.
Twitter handle behind them on a backdrop, and Tennessee's had almost 40 kids talk in fall camp.
And
So
I've not seen anybody nationally putting their brand out there that way either. So you're right, which leads us to iHeart's question, and that is, after 2 months of NIL, what is your assessment? Overblown, underblown, kind of what you thought it would be?
kind of what I thought it would be, but if I was going to go anything, I would go underblown. I mean, a lot of these kids have found out that, what they thought their worth was and what their worth actually is two different things. And so, they're not, unless you're the quarterback at Clemson or Ohio State or Alabama, those people are pulling in some big checks, some some nice chunk of change, but much smaller deals here where there's not really a marquee guy at the moment. Again, Tennessee gets a quarterback similar to Josh Dobbs, and he's very visible and out in the public eye. Then I think that you got a real chance to make some money. But this current team right now, doesn't.
Also, a question for my hearts with Marquez Callaway being the latest fall heading to Canton. How do you explain Butch Jones's recruiting success? How much credit should Bob Weldon get for these guys' success?
I think Zach Azani should get a lot of credit for Callaway and a few of these receivers that have come out in the last couple of years, because he was on the front lines getting all that done, and really helping with evaluations back during that time. Bob did a good job with evaluations. Bob once proclaimed Josh Palmer was going to be better than T. Higgins. Not sure that's the case, but Palmer is someone who's built himself up. The biggest thing that interests me is like, take away a guy like Trey Smith. I mean, Trey Smith was only a 6th rounder because of his heart deal, or lungs. He had the clotting. That had nothing to do with his ability. But like you look at like Kyle Phillips on an NFL roster from a free agency, Shy Tuttle on an NFL roster from free agency, Marquez Callaway, same thing. Jawan's battling it out trying to make a club. Now, I'm not sure he will, but he's at least still in the mix. The most interesting thing to me, Brandon, is how many of these kids, have found a way when they weren't drafted, because normally, there are some, but this many from one school to me is pretty interesting in this little 2-3 year window.
Yeah, it's because it almost feels like you're
Jakob Johnson, another one.
Yeah, like you're giving them credit for an evaluation, but you knock them for the development because they're an NFL talent, which you evaluated and found, but they didn't develop into a higher draft pick or a draft pick. I don't know, but certainly that they got some guys right, and some guys deserve a lot of credit for picking the right place to land in free agency, and then going and making the most of it.
A guy like Nigel Warrior.
Yeah, is he going to make that club?
I think there's a chance. I mean, and would be a great thing for Nigel, even playing some corner.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if the Ravens where that stands with him moving forward. But he's a guy who certainly made some noise in camp to this point. Will this year's team be able to defend the middle of the field more effectively than last year's team? And over under, regardless of who wins the quarterback job, will this year's team score 6 points more per game than last year's team?
Yeah, I hope so. That's a touchdown. If they don't, then Tennessee's in really rough shape. Middle of the field, we've not seen them practice 11 on 11. But one thing I take away is you can't be any worse than you were a year ago. Last year they were terrible. So I think you can only go up.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. Volgrad 05, who are the best 5 players on this football team in your opinion? And wants to know Vescovi or Powell in your starting 5. I would go with Powell. We'll see what Rick Barnes does. He likes Vescovi a lot, but I would go with Powell. Who are your 5 best players on this team? I think that's a hard question to answer, Austin.
Yeah, I mean, ask me a month from now. I mean, like after the Florida game, I just don't think we don't. I mean, enough, but you don't know enough to kind of go that. I mean, that's kind of like really like putting a spotlight on 5 guys on this football team. I mean, I think that Cade would be in your 5. I think, Byron Young, if he plays the way he's had fall camp, then he would be in your 5. But again, until he gets out there and does it on a game field, it's kind of like, I don't want to totally put him in Canton yet. And then after that, like all these receivers are kind of similar to me. Like, I'm not sure, you can say, oh yeah, that guy's definitely in the top 5, but that guy's not. Same thing with the running backs. And then, outside of that, I just think it's just a hodgepodge of, a bunch of similar guys.
Yeah. And again, I think you got to see how they play in this system, how they handle adversity and all of those things before you determine who your 5 best, quote, players are at this point. But, again, I think that's an easier question to answer 3 or 4 games into this season. Brooks 1972 wants to know, do you see one of the backup offensive linemen getting some time at tight end? like they've done in the past because of depth issues? If so, who? And will Coach Heupel put out a depth chart prior to game one?
No and no.
No depth chart prior to game one. Will there be a depth chart all year long?
If there is, it won't come out till after the pit game.
And
before the pit game.
Yeah. And I think the way they use a tight end, I don't think a big offensive lineman makes sense there. I mean, could they have a goal line heavy package of some kind for a play or two, maybe? But to line up and play a series and a quote jumbo package, I don't think that's what they're going to do and what they want to do with this offense, because they ask in this up tempo, Austin, they want those tight ends, flexed out and then inside and out. I thought it was interesting. Alex Golish talking about the tight ends on Wednesday when he met with the media. Sounds like Miles Campbell's kind of hurt himself, or not his fault, but because of his illness, set him back a little bit. And he likes Julian Nixon, but it doesn't seem like he thinks, those guys are ready to help right out of the gate. I think you're going to see a lot of Princeton Fant for Tennessee in this opener at tight end.
And Jacob Warren.
Yeah, early in the year, that's certainly what it feels like. Be curious to see if Hunter Salmon plays some too. I would not be surprised to see him get some snaps as they try to bring Miles Campbell on and Julian Nixon on. Campbell certainly ahead of Nixon, given the fact that he was here this spring, and as Golish said, Nixon was never asked to block in his high school career. Let's go to Corrigan Vol 17. Can we expect our offense to be a Baylor-style offense similar to when RG3 was thrown around for 1,000 yards and TDs everywhere? You hope so. Who knows? We'll see how the quarterback play goes there. Also to AP, what's the real deal? Gut feel with Walter Nolen's situation. Is not enough being made of the fact that Tennessee has got Rodney Garner as its ace in the hole in his recruitment, and the fact that Tennessee can offer him immediate playing time, superstar status, NIL opportunities.
I don't know why you have to get on your burner account to ask me about Walter Nolen. I don't think setting Tennessee up as this favorite helps Tennessee, because I don't think it's a lock that he's coming here. Do I think that Tennessee has as good a shot as anybody? Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that they've really done a nice job, and Rodney's done a phenomenal job. But I think, saying that he's some lock to Tennessee, it would just be wrong, because, again, that recruitment's going to have a bunch of twists and turns. I mean, it was the final three until it was not the final three, and now it's a new final three until it's another final three. I mean, he tweeted about Instagram followers and committing. I mean, like, it's going to be the thing that drives Rodney nuts between now and December.
Yeah, because I think one of the things Rodney's done that's got him in the recruitment is a lot of the honesty, and it's about development. It's not about being a superstar. It's about developing and getting, being the best player you can be, and developing you to be a better person, and certainly to be ready for the National Football League. So I'm sure there's probably going to be some times where there's some shaking, like the whole Instagram thing. Is that legit? I mean, if he gets to a certain number of followers, is he really going to commit?
He got there within like an hour
and didn't commit. So, it's there's some games being played there. And like you say, it's the final three until it's not the final three, and there's a new final three out there. So Tennessee's in it, which Rodney Garner deserves a great deal of credit for. They'll get him on campus, I think, multiple times, and they'll be in it to the end. But the favorite, I'm with you. I'm not putting anybody as a favorite for that one at this point. Out of the 21 recruiting class, who is most likely to outperform their high school ranking?
Jalen Wright. That one's simple, because I think he's going to get a ton of opportunity, and his ability to really change the game with his speed is something that I think will be a wow factor on Saturdays.
And I mean, he wasn't a high school player, but certainly Byron Young would be the guy on the defensive side of the ball that would factor into that. But I agree that this offense seems like a perfect fit for Jalen Wright for sure. Tony G and SC, realizing that we lost several players listed as best in the country to transfer, but we also picked up several that look to be big contributors this year. Do you see the transfer portal activity as a net positive or a net negative as it pertains to the 21 Vols football team as of today?
Well, much like the recruiting classes, you don't know till 3 or 4 years down the line. I don't think you truly know if the totality of Caleb Tremblay, DJ Terry, Jawan Mitchell, Kamal Haddon, Brandon Turnage, Joe Milton, Javante Payton outweigh the loss of Henry, Eric Gray, Wanye, and Keyshawn Lawrence. I don't think you'll know for a couple of years, but it potentially could. Yeah. I don't think the loss of Eric Gray. I think Eric Gray will have a nice year at Oklahoma. I think he'll put up some big games, touchdowns, and everything. But I'm not sure like Tennessee's really worse there without him. Whereas I think losing, Keyshawn Lawrence is a blow because I think that they could really use him a nickel. I think, everyone wants, I know Henry wasn't great a year ago, but, Tennessee could still use linebacker help. And, Wanye, who I would rank 4th out of the 4, he would provide depth, Brent. And that's a position they're just not real deep at.
Yeah, I don't know what the net positive or net negative is going to be. I'll say this. I think Josh Heupel and his staff deserve a lot of credit for building the roster and adding some quality guys when they had clear needs that they had to address because of what happened with Crouch and Henry T leaving. You had to have linebackers. They addressed that. They went and addressed some things. So I don't know what, like you say, I think it's going to take years to determine or time to determine what the net positive, net negative might be. But the fact of the matter is they had to go in the transfer portal, and because they lost good players, and I think they went and got some guys who were going to be good football players, who were going to be big time contributors for them right out of the gate. I think guys that you're going to see early and often against Bowling Green on Thursday night.
Speaking of net, greatest net of all time, Drazen Petrovic, Derek Coleman, or Jason Kidd, go.
Petrovic.
I agree. Could shoot the lights out.
I had to think where you're going for that for a second, but then you were talking about the New Jersey net. So, yeah, he could shoot the lights out. No question there with that one for me. All right. My man, Big Orange 1710 has got a laundry list of Danny White questions for you regarding football schedules. All right, here we go. You ready? If you were Danny White and you're working on future football schedules, would you do the following? 1, schedule the biggest possible non-conference matchups like Oklahoma, Notre Dame, etc. Or would you schedule winnable Power 5 games against teams like Pittsburgh, NC State, etc.? We'll start there.
I would go with the NC State ones because I think this league's going to get tough enough as it is. In the old days, I would lean the Oklahomas and Notre Dames. In the new age of college football, I leaned towards the middle of the road teams that Tennessee's got a much better chance to beat right now.
Schedule neutral site games on a regular basis or just every once in a while?
I think every once in a while if the payday's good. Danny White wants to schedule home and homes, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would not. I mean, and Danny White, this was already set up, would not be playing this West Virginia game because the payout's not big enough. That Chick-fil-A game that they're getting into with Syracuse, where your payout's nearly $5 million, that would make sense. But if your payout's not in that stratosphere, then I'm not playing neutral site games, and I'm certainly not playing them on a regular basis. I'm doing that, on somewhat of a limited basis because I want that home crowd, and I don't want to do those unless you're just offering a whole bunch of money. Number 3, cancel the 22 Army game and find an easier team to prepare for.
Yeah, that's easy. The previous head coach screamed and yelled and went bananas about that game. He wanted it off the schedule for 3 years, and it never did come off. If I was Josh Heupel, I would feel the same way. Playing a team like Army, playing like a team like Paul Johnson's Georgia Tech, tough to defend for. You just don't see it but the one time, and it makes no sense to play that game.
Fourthly, try to get our open date scheduled in the middle of the season before or after Alabama or the week before a key toss-up game like South Carolina or Kentucky. I don't know. I mean, the SEC controls so much of that scheduling. I don't know I don't know how feasible that is to move that stuff around.
I mean, like I think bye weeks matter, but Tennessee played A&M and Alabama back to back, then had the bye week and come out of the bye week and lost to South Carolina in 2016. If they win that game, who knows what happens the following year and how it all transpires, going forward. So, I think they matter, but I wouldn't, bet my whole season on where my bye week is.
Hard hat Vol, do you think the SEC adds more teams or sticks with just OU and Texas in the near future?
I think they'll add more teams.
We'll be curious to see what this whole alliance thing is or isn't. Does it ever become anything with these other three conferences? Pretty fascinating to hear that. They don't have anything signed. What are they trying to do? They're certainly trying to stick it to the SEC.
See, if I was the SEC, I would be really enticed to try to go and get a Clemson and Florida State just to flex my muscle even more, you know?
Yeah, I just financially, I don't know if they can get out of that. Those binding agreements with that league are pretty tough. But I can tell you with this, I would bet there's some teams in the ACC, particularly those two, probably a little uneasy about this alliance because you've already started to hear some of the Big Ten and Pac-12 talk about academics and their institutions of higher learning and all of these things. And that's not to say Clemson and Florida State are not, but they're also football schools. And that they want to be like SEC football schools and they want that big paycheck. So I'd be curious to see how assertive the ACC is in this so-called alliance that is trying to be thrown together here. Ironval wants to know, y'all mentioned Tuesday that if you were UT in regards to the investigation, if you were UT, you would keep putting it off and not self-impose. While I don't disagree with this, would this not hurt recruiting? If we put something out there, could we not get some of the negative recruiting behind us and jumpstart our class a little bit more?
Sure, you could. I mean, I also think there's a different way to skin a cat too. I mean, like you can. By the way, I don't promote skinning cats. Just think that from the standpoint of like, if you're Tennessee, you can look at a kid and say, hey, look, the NCAA didn't rule on Baylor for 6 years. You come here before they even rule, you'll be out of here. You'll be in the NFL. I mean, like different ways to pitch it. And so I think we're getting to a point where I'm not sure it's going to hurt Tennessee much longer in this recruiting cycle. And so, even if you don't self-impose and you play the long game.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the point is, I mean, how much at this point are you going to get a jump start in recruiting with signing day in December and we're heading into September, you're getting ready to head into September. I mean, how much is that? I mean, a lot of these guys have already made decisions. So how much is that really going to help you kind of moving forward this late in that class? Now, if you're talking about 6 months from now, you don't have a resolution, maybe that's certainly working against you. But I don't know how much you can jumpstart things here over the next 12, 14 weeks before you get into signing day. Let's go to the next one. I've heard on multiple outlets about how good the team looks, meaning in terms of their shape and redistribution of weight. There's been so much turnover in our weight program the past 10 years. Who's leading the strength and conditioning these days? Did Heupel bring him with him? Have you guys noticed a difference? Maybe we have solved this at least for the foreseeable future. Can you please provide your thoughts? The
First time
least talked about guy ever.
First time, really since Johnny Long was let go that, I think we did not hype up the strength coach. Kurt Schmidt's his name. I think he's done a really good job. You look at Aubrey Solomon. Now, does he help this defensive line? I don't know, but he looks way better and way more in shape than he was a year ago. Same thing with Darnell Wright. They do seem like they're in really good shape. And you'd expect most of these guys to be, but again, I look at some of these guys that have kind of been sloppy the last couple of years, and they really pass the eye test right now. So you're right. The guy that's been least talked about in the last 15 years or 12 years, however it is a guy that I think probably deserves some praise because he's gotten some good results to this point.
Yeah, it certainly has. Couple other questions here as we get ready to head out the gate. Would you pick last year's football team over this year's football team? Same question for basketball.
Yes, and here's why.
You would take this year?
Yeah, and just because of team chemistry. Again, I think in certain ways this football team is better. In certain ways, last year's football team was better as far as like particular position groups. But I think the chemistry on this team is way better, and it should be better. They're actually hanging out and not, quarantined.
Yeah, I think I would say the same for both, with basketball and football, simply for that matter. I think their development off the field, off the court, in terms of team chemistry, is certainly much better now. They've had normal off seasons, which has helped guys be in much better shape. Now that's a different conversation than saying who's more talented. Maybe that's a bit more of a toss up in basketball when you talk about Springer and Keon Johnson, who were on that team a year ago. But in terms of developing a team, developing the individuals, adjusting to college as freshmen, this basketball team and those newcomers are going to be much further along than last year because they've had a normal off season, and you hope that you don't have a bunch of guys that go into any kind of quarantine like you had last year. I mean, that's a basketball team that had games canceled last year because of COVID, and really stunted the development of that group, particularly early in December. So based on that, I would take both basketball team and a football team from this year, not necessarily saying they're more talented, just saying this should be a better team because of what they've been able to do in terms of normal life here the last 6 or 8 months. Austin, ranked Tennessee's big board when it comes to these 23 in-state offensive linemen. Here's going to be my answer on all these guys he's asked about. I think it's a continued evaluation of all of them. I don't know that there is a ranking of Luke Brown, Bryson Sanders, Joe Crocker, Tyler Jeffries, and Lance Williams. I think all those guys remain in an evaluation stage. Even though a lot of them are here for camp, I think they want to see those guys play this fall.
I would go Sanders, Crocker, Luke Brown, Williams, Jeffries.
Okay, that would be your order. Not saying that those are there's other guys around the country, but just that's where you would kind of rank those guys in the state. But don't you think that that's still a continued evaluation for all those guys in terms of where they would rank on their overall board on the offensive line?
Yeah, because I'm not sure Tennessee would take very many of those guys, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think that just depends on, again, how they perform this fall and kind of where their development is moving forward. All right, last one, and then we're out the door. This is Vol for Life 37643. What happens to guys like Isaac Washington who enter the portal and don't find a home? Will they keep their eligibility till they find a place? Also, quarterback targets for the 23 class. I don't know what happens to a guy who doesn't have. Does his clock start or does it not start? I don't know the answer to that.
He would still have the.
He would have 5 to play for.
Yeah,
Okay.
Dante Moore, Marcel Reed. Those would probably be the top 2, and then the kid name escapes me from Kansas that Tennessee just offered.
Got you. Marcel Reed's interesting. Where's he going to be? Is he going to be a football guy, a basketball guy? Is he going to dedicate to one of those sports? I think there's a ton of talent there to maximize his talent on the football field. He's probably going to have to focus a little bit more on football than what he has focused on to this point in his high school, career, where he's played a ton of basketball.
He's got to put on weight, and that's the thing, is buying in to the football side of things. I know he wants to play both, but you're only Allen Iverson until you're not. So that's kind of where I'm at with Marcel Reed. If he goes football and puts on the weight, then he's got big time potential. He's already got potential, but I'm talking big time potential if he puts on the weight.
Yes. And then the last basketball question I'll answer here. This is from Rocky Top 73. I'm going to answer this basketball question. The apparent Ziegler, North Carolina point guard or New York point guard signing, is the thinking that he's a 2 to 3 year player who provides the Vols 2 dynamic point guards for at least this season and next, thus fixing a weakness in Barnes' teams the past 4 seasons.
Exactly what it is.
Yeah, this is a guy that they watched play. They saw him play Brandon Miller. Rob talked about this in the Tuesday podcast. They saw him play against Brandon Miller, and he was really good in the Peach Jam. They decided to really watch him play some more, and they decided to offer. Rick Barnes always wants a fast point guard, and he wants a guy who's going to be in the program for multiple years to provide depth and a guy that they can count on in any situation. So that's why you're seeing Tennessee go the direction they are going with Ziegler. And we're going to go the direction of football because a week from today, Tennessee plays against Bowling Green in the season opener. So that's going to do it for this Thursday edition of the Mailbag Podcast presented by Blue Water Climate Control. For Austin Price, I'm Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your Thursday, everybody.